I'm going to present a paper that basically explores the effect of heat waves on birth weight in 11 sub-Saharan African countries. So we know there is quite a lot of research showing that intrauterine shocks can adversely affect health outcomes at birth, in particular birth weight. And more recently, researchers have been increasingly interested in the role that climate variability and extreme weather have on birth outcomes. But very little is known about the effects on birth weight, or the effects of heat wave shocks on birth weight. And heat waves are considered one of the most important global health challenges of this century, and with increasing global warming, the frequency, intensity, and duration of heat-related events is projected to continue to increase through the 21st century. So why is it important to look at the effects of heat wave on birth weight? It is important for several reasons. So first of all, birth weight is a marker of early health status. It also has effects on the development of well-being during childhood and adulthood, and also its negative effects can be transmitted to the next generations. So the relationship between birth weight and short and long run health, education, and socioeconomic outcomes suggests that if heat waves reduces birth weight, its impact may affect population health and well-being in ways that we hadn't thought of. And this is especially true in sub-Saharan African countries that are especially exceptionally vulnerable to climate extremes compared with other regions, and also where it's the countries where most people rely on weather-sensitive activities for their livelihoods. So, how is heat wave related to birth weight, you may wonder. So, in the literature, heat wave for pregnant women is often and only be considered as social stress. So what heat stress does, it does trigger the production of hormones that are related to premature delivery. And premature delivery is one of the drivers of low birth weight. And while this may be true in high-income countries, it's not necessarily the case in low-income countries or in low-income rural contexts, where heat wave may affect the harvest and also lead to reductions in maternal nutritional intake during pregnancy, as well as altering the disease environment by affecting the transmission cycle of diseases. And both these effects then affect basically birth weight. So what the literature tells us is that low birth weight is caused by two mechanisms, either reduced gestational age at birth or intrauterine growth restriction. And what we know is that the effect of stress mainly operates through reduced gestational age at birth, and the effects of undernutrition and diseases are often related in intrauterine growth restriction. And so understanding which mechanism is at play in the relationship between heat wave and birth weight will inform us whether or not the effect is driven by a stress reaction among pregnant women or by other reactions like nutritional shocks or altered disease environment. And I also examine when during the pregnancy heat wave affects birth weight. This is important because the effect of birth weight may depend on when during the pregnancy heat wave occurs. So in this study, what I do, this study basically informs when during the gestation heat wave is more critical, and the extent to which gestational age at birth and uterine growth contribute to the effect of heat wave exposure on birth weight. And so what I do, I combine data sets. I combine the georeferenced micro-level data from 11 demographic and health surveys. I use obviously I use GPS coordinates of the clusters in which women live, and then I combine these data with climate data from the ERA 5 archive from the European Centre for Medium-Term Weather Forecasting, which contains information on maximum temperature on an hourly basis. And it is important that the DHS data contain information, as I said, about the geographic location of where women live. Which is important to locate women in space and to match every newborn to the climate grid. And also, we know when the babies were born, so we know the date of birth of the baby. And then using the latitude and the longitude data on the DHS, we match individual and climate data. And so, how do I define heat wave? What is heat wave? Heat wave is I define it as a period of 4 more consecutive days with daily maximum temperature that exceed a certain threshold. And what I do, I look at each trimester during the gestation and look at whether the baby was exposed to any heat wave during each trimester of gestation. And then I estimate a diff-and-diff model where I basically estimate the effect of exposure to heat wave during the first, the second, and the third trimester, but also include other control variables such as child sex or also maternal education, and then I include several control variables. I'm happy to talk about them if you're interested. But so what I want to show is these. The figure shows basically the results of the effect of birth weight of exposure to exposure to heat waves on birth weight during gestation. And I find that exposure in the second trimester results in significant declines in birth weight, while exposure in the first and the third trimester does not have any significant effect on birth weight. And the literature, what the literature says is that exposure to stress early in pregnancy leads to decreased birth weight, which also implies that the effect of heat wave on birth weight might actually be driven by a stress reaction among pregnant women. And so to further shed a light on whether stress, nutritional shock, and the disease environment pathway are driving this finding, what I do, I estimate the same model, so the effect of heat wave on the 2 causes of low birth weight. One is gestational age at birth, and the other one is uterine growth. And what I find is that the exposure to heat wave during the second trimester reduces gestational age at birth, and it does not really have any significant effects on uterine growth. So the literature basically tells us that the effect of stress mainly operates through reduced gestational age at birth. And so if heat wave reduces gestational age, we will have more reasons to believe that stress is actually driving the effect of heat wave on birth weight. And so So as a whole, these results basically support the hypothesis that the influence of heat wave exposure on birth weight is actually mediated by reduced gestational age. And so that being exposed to heat wave reduces gestational age at birth, and this is actually leading to reductions in birth weight. So in the just to discuss, just to conclude a bit, what I find, the analysis basically shows that significant decline in birth weight among the babies exposed to heat wave, and the effect is focused on the second trimester of gestation. Second, I find that Heatwave in the second trimester of gestation affects birth outcomes through reduced gestational age. So it is increased prematurity rather than intrauterine growth retardation, which explains the pronounced effect on below birth weight. I also assess differential vulnerability to Heatwaves across subgroups of the population and find no evidence of that. So boys are as disadvantaged as girls, children of high educated parents or high educated mothers, fathers are as disadvantaged as children of low educated parents, and children living in urban areas are as disadvantaged as children living in rural areas. So this finding basically are saying that there is no way to escape the negative health consequences of exposure to heatwave shocks during gestation. So the findings here highlight the importance of early environmental conditions in the production of health and socioeconomic inequalities, and they also carry important lessons for policymakers to protect all pregnant women from heatwave exposure to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. So it is important, it is crucial to invest in maternal health since early pregnancy by shielding pregnant women of all social strata from exposure to heatwaves. And with that, I'm done. Thank you very much.